Hey everyone. Okay, so I talked about OCD, tics, Tourette's, and kind of what's underneath that and so forth last week. Today, I want to talk about something that comes up. To be honest, not just with OCD, tics, Tourette's, or those symptoms, but also even with ADHD and even with learning difficulties and so forth. A lot of parents will say it's really frustrating because one minute things are really severe and it's really awful and we're in full on crisis mode, and then the next minute everything's kind of waned and things have improved and so forth. So this can be really frustrating whenever you think your child's symptoms have resolved. You think, oh, they're growing out of this, or they've just matured, or whatever the case may be. And then all of a sudden, it could be a few weeks, it could be a few months later, it could be many months later, everything can kind of come back in full force and sometimes even worse. And it can just be so disheartening when you're on this roller coaster. I myself was there with my daughter when she was really struggling with sensory processing issues. We would think, oh man, this just seems to have completely disappeared. She's fine now. And then all of a sudden things would come back. And to be quite honest, for us, it would come back with a vengeance. So this is really frustrating with OCD, tics, Tourette's, as well as other things. Whenever you're told there's no known cause, it's genetic, or it's just we don't know the real factors and so forth. When really functional neurology has identified various factors that cause and exasperate things like tics, OCD, Tourette's, and so forth. And what has been found is these kids go in and out of flares. So flares meaning whenever they're kind of at their worst, and it tends to peak and then it might plateau for a bit and then resolve slowly, slowly, slowly until the next trigger. And what's been found is that what's causing these flares are various triggers in terms of exposures to toxins, pathogens, and food sensitivities. Which result in brain inflammation. But it's important to know that this is occurring because of immune dysregulation. So the trigger disappears, the body brings down the inflammation, the symptoms wane until the next exposure. And to be clear, there's usually more than one trigger, because this really isn't about it is about the trigger and isn't. So I don't want to say it's not about the mold, or it's not about the strep, or it's not about the toxins, but it's really how the immune system is responding, particularly to pathogens like, a cold virus or strep infection and so forth. So this basically these tics are triggered by various environmental factors, and then the immune system is dysregulated, and so that causes the inflammation to go up. So and this results then in brain inflammation and all these exasperated behaviors and so forth. So let me know in the comments, whether you're watching the live or the replay, does this sound like your child? Do their symptoms wax and wane? What does that look like? And one clue is to pay attention to when do their symptoms get worse. Is there certain times of the year? Is it after they've eaten something, and it might not be within a few hours? It could be a few days or a week or so. It's a big sign that something biochemical is at play. So example of tics and Tourette's are things like, I want to share this just because in the early phases, a lot of parents are really frustrated later on that they overlooked some of these tics as just mannerism quirks, just how their child is and so forth. I definitely did that, because it could be something really simple, like just kind of blinking your eyes. And with girls, you might think, oh, they're just, really girly or something. It could be darting their eyes. It could just look like a mannerism where they just kind of go like this sometimes, right? Squinting. And I want to be cautious or caution you not to um, you know, read the different things, because we do have our quirks. Um, Other things is lip twitching, lip licking. So a lot of girls, little girls, I don't know why it seems to be more girls, but they'll come in and they'll have really, really chapped lips. And that was my daughter for sure. And we'll say, quit licking your lips, but it's actually part of the tic. So it's really hard for them to restrain themselves from that compulsion until we address the root cause. Raising eyebrows, compulsive touching, compulsive smelling, shoulder shrugs, right? My daughter did that too. And I was like, oh, that's so cute. She kind of shrugs her shoulders when she talks at certain points. So it wasn't really obvious, and it just looked like she was really expressive. Grunting, sniffing, coughing, throat clearing, any of those types of things, head jerking, walking a particular way or skipping in a certain pattern, echolalia. So that's repeating a word multiple times. So again, my daughter would do that where you might say, we're going to go for a car ride to, I don't know, Toronto. And maybe she's never heard the word Toronto before, or maybe she hasn't, and she'd be saying under her breath, Toronto, Toronto, Toronto. That is another really common tic that we don't think of as being that connected to Tourette's, tics, OCD, all of that type of stuff. Twitching or bending, any other repetitive movements. And the important thing to know with tics is that they can often be transient. So the eye blinking can go on for a while and they think, oh, okay, it's resolved. But then actually now they started shrugging their shoulders, but you don't connect that. You think, oh, they're just such a cute little expressive talker. So just to be aware that it starts off as those simple tics that I talked about last week, and it can progress into complex tics where they're doing more than one tic in the same moment. So things that I want to talk about with OCD, I just want to talk about signs of OCD. And the reason I want to touch on that is because there is misconception. Some people will just assume it's like when someone wants to wash their hands 400 times, which that's definitely the most severe form, but there's mild forms of OCD too. And I want to warn people that, a lot of people who are very type A will say, I'm an OCD. They might be. All of us kind of have our things. Like, perfect example, I joke I'm OCD about making my bed. I don't know why. I was never made to make my bed as a child, but as an adult, it's just the best way to start my morning, which is so weird, to make my bed. It makes me feel really good to have my bed made. And it's a little bit of a compulsion. Is it affecting my ability to function in my daily life? Absolutely not. Is it a good habit? 100%. So I want to distinguish where we all have our things that we like to do. And then there's a point where it can be problematic. So signs of OCD, one type of OCD is just fear of contamination or dirt. So that's any kind of thing linked to being kind of what we call a germphobe, but it could also be dust or dirt and so forth, and where it's really affecting somebody's ability to function. That's where you really kind of draw the line. The second type is like doubting or having difficulty with uncertainty. So needing to double check, needing to check things. So it could be needing to make sure the door is locked, needing to make sure their whatever is in a certain place, or it could be needing to verify, do you love me? I love you, mommy. Do you love me? It could be something like that. It could be making sure, are you going to be home at this time? That's a very, indication of either anxiety and OCD, and both really are linked, right? Adults, and I'm going to just throw this in because I see it with some kids too, is that certainty of having to look things up constantly, needing that verification from something online that this is okay, or trying to get more answers to the point where it's all consuming. Third type, we've all seen this. We see it in movies. It can be even, people can make a joke out of it and so forth, right? The person who's a real neat freak, needing things orderly and symmetrical, lined up, all that type of stuff. However, this can be extremely disruptive to somebody's life, right? If it gets out of hand. And sometimes this can pertain to things like linked to what we call just right OCD. So I find a lot of kids who are diagnosed with sensory processing disorder, sometimes there's some actual just right OCD going on, where they're upset because the one sock feels tighter than the other, right? And we tend to think of that as sensory processing disorder, but that can very much be connected to, it could be, a lot of kids can have both, but it could be connected to OCD, where the compulsion to make things even, right? The compulsion to have the feeling that both mitts feel the same way or both boots feel the same way. Fourth is aggressive or horrific thoughts about losing control or harming themselves. This can cause a lot of anxiety, some pretty intense anxiety in kids. And then repeating behaviors or words as a form of ritual. So I mentioned the echolalia, but there's often all kinds of other things as well that kids might do where they have to kind of ritualize things. And this is where you see this can become more complex as well, right? The rituals or the behaviors or whatever could become more complex as they are trying to manage higher and higher levels of anxiety. So let me know in the comments below, does your child's symptoms wax and wane? Do you have a suspicion that there could be an issue? Maybe you have a suspicion, or deep down in your gut that something's up and you've been told it's transient, it's no big deal, they'll grow out of it. If you suspect that and something isn't sitting right, reach out. I was definitely that parent. I was told it's just a phase and she'll grow out of it and all that type of stuff. And it was none of those things. It was in our case, quite serious. And I don't want to scare people because that's not what we want to do. And also because sometimes it's just, something that we can address, and it's not like, the immune system basically attacking the brain, which is the case in my daughter's situation. Okay, so I am going to post a link in the comments below for number one, my laser focused learner starter kit with exercises and so forth to get started. And number two, if you would like to book a free clarity call to learn more about our 6 and 9 month programs that work on addressing the biochemical imbalance in the brain, as well as retraining the brain. So thanks for watching, everyone. Have a fantastic day.